The distress signal arrived during the annual peace celebration, which made everything worse. Thousands of diplomats from across the galaxy had gathered at the council station above Arium 7 to celebrate 300 years without major conflict. The irony would not be lost on anyone later. Norrin noticed it first. The young amphibian technician had drawn the unfortunate duty of monitoring the deep space communication arrays while everyone else attended the festivities. His webbed fingers moved across the holographic display, triple-checking what he was seeing. The signal was old, incredibly old, using a protocol that predated the modern council by at least 2 centuries. More concerning was its origin point, Sector 87, the Forbidden Zone. Nobody went to Sector 87. The region contained 12 star systems, all marked with the highest quarantine designation. Deathworlds, every single one of them. Planets where the local conditions were so hostile that the dominant species evolved into something the rest of the galaxy considered terrifying. The Council had sealed the sector after several disastrous first contact attempts. Better to leave them alone, the thinking went, than risk another incident. But someone had gone there. The signal was clearly a distress call, and it was coming from a vessel using Council technology. Norrin pulled up the registry database, his heart sinking as he found the match. The research vessel Harmony had been reported missing 3 weeks ago. It had been studying stellar phenomena near the quarantine boundary. Clearly it had drifted too close. He needed to report this immediately. Norrin left his station and made his way through the crowded observation halls toward the diplomatic wing. Beings of every shape and size celebrated around him. The Feathered Imperium had sent their finest singers. The Pond Collective, his own people, had contributed a bioluminescent water display that floated through the air. The rock-like beings from the core worlds stood in philosophical discussion. Nobody wanted to hear about problems today. Ambassador Talara was holding court in the main reception hall, her brilliant blue and gold feathers catching the light as she gestured dramatically. She came from a species that valued appearance and status above most things. Interrupting her during a celebration would be a serious breach of protocol. Norrin did it anyway. "Ambassador, we have a situation." He kept his voice low, respectful but urgent. Talara's large eyes fixed on him with clear annoyance. "This is hardly the time, technician. Whatever minor technical issue you have discovered can wait until—" "It's a distress call from the Harmony. They're in the Forbidden Zone." The chatter around them died instantly. Everyone within hearing distance turned to stare. Talara's feathers flattened against her body, a sign of extreme displeasure among her kind. "Impossible. No vessel would be foolish enough to enter that sector. The signal is genuine. I verified it 3 times. They're using the old emergency protocols, the ones from before the quarantine was established." Another ambassador stepped forward, a tall being covered in thick fur from the northern reaches. "If there are survivors, we are obligated to attempt rescue. Council law is clear on this matter." Talara's beak clicked rapidly, another sign of agitation. "The law also forbids entry into quarantine zones under any circumstances. The Deathworlds are sealed for good reason. Some of you may be too young to remember, but I was present during the last incident. The creatures from the 3rd planet, the ones who call themselves humans, destroyed an entire scout fleet in less than an hour. Destroyed it. Their world is a nightmare of disease, predators, and natural disasters. Yet they rose to dominate it completely. They are dangerous beyond measure." "Then we send a military escort," the furry ambassador countered. 12 ships fully armed. We retrieve the Harmony and leave immediately. The Deathworlders need never know we were there." The debate continued for nearly an hour. Norrin stood quietly to the side, watching the most powerful beings in the galaxy argue about the value of their own people's lives weighed against their fear. Eventually, caution lost to duty. The Council voted to authorize a rescue mission. Captain Darius, a methodical commander from the Silicon Syndicate, would lead 12 warships into Sector 87. Norrin requested permission to join the mission as a communications specialist. Talara granted it with obvious reluctance, perhaps hoping the experience would teach him not to bring bad news to celebrations. The fleet departed within 6 hours. As they approached the quarantine boundary, Norrin studied everything he could find about the Forbidden Zone. Most files were sealed or heavily redacted, but he pieced together fragments. The humans had been contacted 300 years ago during the galaxy's expansion period. Something had gone wrong. The official report called it a tragic misunderstanding. The unofficial accounts whispered about slaughter. When they crossed into Sector 87, every ship's alarm system activated simultaneously. They were violating protocols that had stood for 3 centuries. The boundary itself was marked by ancient warning buoys, their messages blunt and terrifying. Quarantine zone. Deathworld species. Do not approach. Do not engage. Do not transmit. Norrin watched the 3rd planet of the system called Sol grow larger on the view screen as they passed it. Earth. Homeworld of the humans. It looked beautiful from space, all blue oceans and white clouds. Hard to believe something so lovely could produce such feared creatures. Then his console lit up with a new signal, and Norrin felt his blood freeze. They hadn't just received the Harmony's distress call. They had triggered something else entirely. Deep within Earth's orbital space, automated systems were waking up after centuries of silence. The translation came through clearly. Emergency beacon activated. Distress call confirmed. Initiating response protocol. They had just told the humans that someone needed help in their space, and the humans were answering. The Orbital Defense Station Haven 1 had been running on automatic mode for so long that most people forgot it was even there. It hung in the darkness beyond the moon, a massive ring of weapons and sensors that represented humanity's promise to itself. Never again would they be caught unprepared. The skeleton crew that maintained it treated their posting as a quiet retirement job. Nothing ever happened anymore. Admiral Grace Park was reviewing supply requisitions when the entire station lurched to full combat alert. Every screen in her office blazed red. Klaxons that hadn't sounded in decades screamed through the corridors. For a moment she thought it was a drill that nobody had told her about. Then she saw the alert code and realized this was much worse. Someone had triggered the old beacon network, the ancient first contact emergency system that humanity had built into the quarantine barrier. The system that was supposed to let the galaxy ask for help if they ever realized they had made a mistake. Park had always assumed it would never be used, that the aliens would rather die than admit they needed the scary humans. She was at the command center within minutes, still pulling on her uniform jacket. Commander Luis Ortega was already there, his face grim as he studied the tactical displays. Dr. Yuki Tanaka appeared moments later via hologram from the research station on Mars, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. "Tell me this is a malfunction," Park said, knowing it wasn't. "Negative, Admiral. The signal is legitimate." The beacon was activated by a council vessel in distress approximately 47 minutes ago. Current location is near the inner boundary of the quarantine zone. Multiple hostile contacts engaged with council forces. The automated response protocol is asking if we want to deploy assets. Park studied the data stream. A rescue fleet of 12 alien ships had entered their space and immediately run into trouble. Pirates, probably, or one of the other hostile groups that operated in the lawless regions between council space and the quarantine barrier. The aliens were outgunned and taking heavy casualties. They quarantined us for 300 years. Ortega's voice was hard, angry, locked us away like criminals because we defended ourselves. Now they want our help? They didn't lock us away, Dr. Tanaka countered from her hologram. They were terrified. We have to remember how we looked to them during first contact. We were testing weapons that day. Nuclear-tipped missiles, particle beam satellites, kinetic bombardment systems. They saw a world armed to destroy itself and thought we were about to attack them. Park remembered the history lessons. The alien scouts had appeared without warning over major cities. Humanity, fresh off a century of devastating wars and still deeply paranoid about threats from above, had responded the way they always did, with overwhelming force. The scout ships were vaporized before anyone realized they were trying to communicate. When the aliens sent a larger fleet to investigate what happened to their scouts, humanity assumed it was retaliation and hit them even harder. By the time both sides realized it was all a horrible mistake, thousands were dead and the galaxy had decided humanity was too dangerous to contact. The quarantine went up. Humanity was left alone with their regrets and their weapons. We could ignore this, Ortega said. Let them handle their own problems. It's not our sector, not our responsibility. It became our responsibility the moment they asked for help. Park pulled up the personnel roster, scanning through the names of every crew member currently assigned to combat-ready vessels. 6 ships could be launched within the hour. More if they waited, but people were dying right now. If we do this, Tanaka said carefully, it changes everything. We'll be revealing our current capabilities, our technology level, our military strength. The Council quarantined us when we were using primitive fusion drives and chemical rockets. We've advanced significantly since then. Some of them might see that as a threat. Park nodded slowly. She had spent 30 years in the defense forces, working her way up through a system that existed only to prepare for a threat that never came. Humanity had used their isolation well. They had refined their technology, unified their governments, expanded throughout their solar system. They had built ships that would terrify the species that had locked them away. And they had done it all because they never wanted to be helpless again. But they had also changed in other ways. The wars that had defined the 21st and 22nd centuries were ancient history now. Humanity had learned hard lessons about cooperation, about channeling aggression into exploration and discovery instead of destruction. They were still warriors at heart, still children of a death world that had taught them to be strong or die, but they had grown up. Prepare 6 vessels for immediate deployment, Park ordered. Pull crews from the reserve roster. I want our best people on this. Captain David Reed takes command of the Defiant as mission leader. Tell him to use minimum necessary force and prioritize the rescue of survivors. This is a first contact situation. We're not there to start a war. We're there to remind the galaxy that humanity keeps its promises, even to people who feared us. Ortega looked like he wanted to argue, but he saluted and moved to carry out the orders. Dr. Tanaka smiled from her hologram. You're doing the right thing. Grace, this could be the beginning of something important. Real dialogue with the Council. A chance to end the isolation. Or it could be a trap, Park replied quietly. They might have sent that signal specifically to draw us out, to see what we've become. Either way, we have to respond. Because if we don't, if we let fear keep us isolated, then the galaxy was right to be afraid of us. We'll have proven we're exactly what they thought we were. Dangerous creatures that only care about ourselves. The ships launched 37 minutes later. Park watched them accelerate toward the quarantine boundary on drives that bent space itself. Technology the Council didn't know humanity possessed. Each vessel carried enough firepower to level a continent. Each crew member had trained their entire lives for combat in the most hostile environment imaginable, space itself. They were humanity's answer to 300 years of isolation. 6 ships against whatever was out there. 6 chances to prove that the scariest thing about deathworlders wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their refusal to abandon someone who needed help, even someone who had abandoned them first. As the fleet disappeared beyond the moon, Park allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe the galaxy would see humanity differently this time. Maybe they could finally come home. Or maybe they were about to remind the Council exactly why humanity had been quarantined in the first place. Everything went wrong the moment the Council fleet reached the Harmony. The research vessel hung dead in space, its hull breached in multiple places, life support failing. Debris floated around it like a metal cloud, evidence of whatever attack had crippled it. Norin watched from his station aboard Captain Darris's flagship Unity as rescue shuttles prepared to launch. Then the pirates appeared. They came out of the asteroid field in a swarm, 30 ships of various designs and origins. The Ravagers were famous throughout the galaxy as one of the most brutal pirate collectives operating in the outer regions. They attacked merchant convoys, raided isolated colonies, and disappeared before military forces could respond. Norin had read reports about them, but never imagined he would face them personally. Their leader broadcast a message that was more threat than communication. Council fools. You flew right into our trap. The research ship was bait and you swallowed it whole. Surrender your vessels and we might let some of you live. Hask, the Ravager commander, sounded amused. His species was known for brutality, with thick armored skin and natural weapons. They had been rejected for Council membership centuries ago, due to their violent culture. Clearly they held a grudge. Captain Darris was a logical being, all silicon-based intelligence and calculated responses. He immediately ordered the fleet into defensive formation around the Harmony. All ships raise shields and charge weapons. We will not surrender. Prepare for engagement. The battle was brief and brutal. The Ravagers had numbers and experience. The Council ships had better technology but crews that had never seen real combat. The first exchange of fire destroyed 3 Council vessels instantly, their shields failing under concentrated bombardment. Norin watched beings he had shared meals with die in flashes of light and expanding clouds of debris. Chief Engineer Bryn worked frantically at the power distribution controls, routing energy to shields as fast as the reactors could provide it. We cannot sustain this. Their weapons are too strong. We need reinforcements. We need a miracle, Darius interrupted, his crystalline face reflecting the tactical display. The 9 remaining council ships formed a sphere around the Harmony, trying to protect it while defending themselves. They were failing at both tasks. Another ship lost shields and began venting atmosphere. Norin's communication console lit up with an incoming signal on a frequency he didn't recognize. The language was rough, harsh to his ears, but the translation software managed to process it. What he heard made his gills flutter with terror. Emergency beacon detected. Analyzing tactical situation. 6 vaisseaux en route. Arrival in 90 seconds. Captain. Norin's voice cracked with panic. I'm detecting a response to the beacon we triggered. Multiple ships approaching at impossible speeds. They're coming from the 3rd planet. Ambassador Talara, who had insisted on joining the rescue mission despite having no military training, began broadcasting on all frequencies. Cancel the beacon! Cancel it now! Do not let the Deathworlders. 6 shapes dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the battle space. They were smaller than the council vessels, sleek and dark, covered in what looked like ablative armor. No decorative elements, no unnecessary structures, just pure function. They looked like what they were, weapons designed to kill. The human ships hung there for a moment, silent and still. Norin imagined sensors sweeping the battlefield, calculating odds, determining friend from foe. He wondered what the humans thought, seeing the council species that had imprisoned them now dying in their space. Then the lead human ship broadcast a message that was translated instantly. This is Captain David Reed of the UESS Defiant. We received your distress call. Stand aside. Hask's response came in the form of mocking laughter broadcast across all channels. Humans, the council's caged pets. I wondered if you would come. 6 ships against my 30? Your species is as stupid as it is ugly. You should have stayed in your cage. The Ravager fleet opened fire on the human vessels, apparently believing the humans were as unprepared as the council forces. Energy beams and kinetic projectiles crossed the void at incredible speeds, enough firepower to vaporize any normal ship. The human vessels absorbed the hits on shields that blazed bright blue and held solid. Not a single human ship even moved from the impacts. Reed's voice came again, colder now. That was your warning shot. Leave. Now. Instead of retreating, Hask ordered his full fleet to focus fire on the Defiant. Everything they had all at once concentrated on a single target. The space around the human ship lit up like a star as explosions and energy beams struck its shields continuously for nearly 10 seconds. When the light faded, the Defiant hung there completely undamaged. Norin realized he was holding his breath. This wasn't possible. No ship could withstand that kind of punishment. But the humans weren't using normal technology. They had advanced far beyond what the Council believed possible. Hostile action confirmed, Reed said, his voice carrying no emotion at all. All vessels weapons free. Eliminate the threat. What happened next would haunt Norin's dreams for years. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever seen. They accelerated at speeds that should have turned their crews into paste from the gravitational forces. They executed turns that violated everything Norin knew about physics. And their weapons were beyond anything the galaxy had developed. Kinetic rounds accelerated to near light speed, punched through Ravager shields like they didn't exist. Particle beams carved through armor plating. One human ship, smaller than the others and moving even faster, wove through the Ravager formation like a predator among prey. Its pilot, someone called Sarah Kim according to the communication chatter, destroyed 4 ships in less than a minute. The Defiant's tactical officer, a man named Peter Cross, coordinated the attack with ruthless efficiency. Target priority Alpha through Zeta, all hostiles marked. Weapons hot, engage at will. The Ravagers tried to fight back. They scattered, regrouped, attempted flanking maneuvers. Nothing worked. The humans hunted them with a precision that spoke of countless hours of training and preparation. This was what a Deathworld species looked like when it went to war. This was why the Council had been so afraid. Hask's flagship tried to run, its engines burning at maximum power. A human ship intercepted it, fired once, and the massive vessel came apart in a cascade of explosions. Norin watched the destruction with a mixture of horror and awe. The battle had lasted 12 minutes. 30 Ravager ships reduced to debris and fleeing survivors. Not a single human vessel showed damage. The human fleet regrouped, their formation perfect and professional. Then slowly they turned toward the council ships. Ambassador Talara began praying to her gods in a high-pitched keen. Dares powered down weapons and shields in a gesture of surrender. Everyone waited to see if humanity would finish what the Ravagers had started. Captain Reed's voice came across the communication channels one more time. Council vessels, this is the Defiant. Do you still require assistance? Our medical teams are standing by, and we have repair drones ready to stabilize your damaged ships. Please respond. Norin found his voice somehow. Yes, we require assistance. The Harmony has wounded aboard. Multiple council ships are damaged. Thank you. There was a pause, then Reed responded with something that sounded almost like gentle humor. We received your distress call. That's what it's for. Defiant out. As human repair drones launched toward the damaged council ships and medical teams prepared to transfer over, Norin realized something profound had just happened. The galaxy had spent 300 years treating humanity like dangerous animals that needed to be caged. The humans had just proven they were dangerous, yes, but they had also proven they were exactly what they claimed to be. Protectors who answered calls for help, even from people who feared them. He wondered if the Council was ready for that truth. The human repair drones were unsettling to watch. They moved with purpose and precision, crawling over the damaged Council ships like metal insects, sealing breaches and restoring power systems with efficiency that bordered on disturbing. Norin observed them working on the Unity's hull from an observation port, fascinated despite his lingering fear. What happened next was even more unexpected than the battle. Captain David Reed requested permission to board the Unity for direct negotiations. Ambassador Talara had locked herself in her quarters, refusing to come out or communicate with anyone. Captain Derez, despite being the ranking military officer, seemed equally reluctant to face the humans. That left Norin, a junior technician who had started this entire situation by reporting the distress signal, to volunteer as the Council's representative. He made his way to the docking port with legs that felt like they might collapse at any moment. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's voice had been in his ear for the past 20 minutes, speaking from Earth via the quantum communication link the humans had offered to establish. She was a xenobiologist, she explained, someone who had spent her entire career studying what little information existed about other species in the galaxy. Remember, Norin, humans are not monsters. They evolved on a difficult world, yes, but that made them resilient. Not evil. Be honest, be direct. Humans appreciate straightforward communication. Easy for her to say. She wasn't about to meet beings who had just destroyed 30 warships in 12 minutes. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Captain David Reed stepped through with one other person, a woman in a different uniform who was introduced as Lieutenant Commander Amy Stone, his first officer. Reed was tall by human standards, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to absorb everything around him. His face was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made him more intimidating. This was a being who could order death with casual efficiency and then offer help without hesitation. Technician Norin, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I understand this situation is complicated. Reed's voice matched his appearance, calm and measured. He made no sudden movements, kept his hands visible, clearly trying not to appear threatening. Your species saved us, Norin managed to say, after we imprisoned you for 3 centuries. I do not understand why. Reed smiled slightly. You sent a distress call. We answered it. It's that simple. Though I admit, we're curious about why you entered the quarantine zone at all. Over the next hour, Norin explained everything. The peace celebration, the Harmony's disappearance, the debate among the Council about whether to attempt rescue. He told them about the historical records of first contact, how humanity had been classified as too dangerous for interaction. Reed listened without interrupting, his expression growing more thoughtful as the story continued. So the galaxy has spent 300 years thinking we're violent savages, Reed said finally, while we spent 300 years thinking we were exiled criminals being punished for defending ourselves. That's quite a misunderstanding. Lieutenant Stone spoke up for the first time. Captain, we need to address the Harmony. Our scans show life signs aboard, but there's something unusual. One of the survivors is human. The revelation hit like a physical blow. A human aboard a Council research vessel, in the quarantine zone where humans were forbidden to travel. Reed's calm expression hardened. Explain. More information came through as Norrin connected his datapad to the human ship systems, something that should have been impossible given the difference in technology. The humans made it work anyway. The Harmony had indeed been conducting research near the quarantine boundary, studying the effects of the barrier itself. But they had also been conducting a secret project, studying a human who had somehow been captured years ago. Her name is Dr. Lena Foster. Stone read from the data. Biochemist. Disappeared during an unauthorized survey mission to the edge of Council space 14 years ago. She's been aboard the Harmony ever since, listed as a research subject, not a crew member. Reed's jaw tightened. They've been studying her. For 14 years, treating a sentient being like a laboratory animal. Dr. Tanaka's voice came through the communication channel, addressing both Reed and Norrin. This changes everything. The Council violated their own quarantine protocols not just by entering the zone, but by kidnapping a human citizen for study. This isn't just a rescue mission anymore. This is a diplomatic incident. The rescue of the Harmony's crew took another 3 hours. Human medical teams, wearing armor that looked intimidating but served practical purposes in dangerous environments, carefully extracted survivors from the damaged sections. Beings from a dozen different species were brought aboard the human ships for treatment. The humans handled each one with surprising gentleness, despite having no prior experience with most of their physiologies. Dr. Lena Foster was the last survivor brought out. She looked small and fragile compared to the armored humans carrying her stretcher, but her eyes were sharp and aware. When Reed boarded the Harmony personally to meet her, Norrin followed, unwilling to miss this conversation. Foster was conscious but weak, lying in what had clearly been a containment cell rather than proper quarters. She looked at Reed with an expression that mixed relief, anger, and resignation. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice rough from disuse. 14 years. I wondered if anyone even knew I was gone." "We knew," Reed replied quietly. "We've been searching." "But the Council space was off limits. We couldn't send ships to look for you without starting a war. I'm sorry it took this long." Foster closed her eyes briefly. "They weren't cruel. Not deliberately. They just didn't see me as a person. I was a specimen, a way to study the dangerous humans without risking direct contact. They measured everything. My reactions to stress, my physical capabilities, my psychological resilience. They wanted to understand what made us so scary." "Did you tell them?" Reed asked, eventually. "After years of their tests, I explained that humans aren't scary because we're strong or violent. We're scary because we survived a world that tried to kill us in a million different ways, and we refused to die. We learned to adapt, to think, to cooperate despite our differences. Earth taught us that the strong protect the weak because someday you might be the weak one. That lesson apparently didn't translate well." Norrin felt shame burning through his entire body. He had known the Council feared humans, but he had never considered that they might have violated their own ethics in that fear. Foster had been a person, a scientist, someone with a life and family and dreams, and she had been reduced to a research subject because of where she was born. Reed turned to Norrin, and the younger alien found himself unable to meet those dark human eyes. "Technician, I need you to understand something. We came here to help because it was the right thing to do. We fought the Ravagers because they were threatening innocent lives. But what happened to Dr. Foster, this is something we cannot ignore. The Council violated every principle of sentient rights. They kidnapped, imprisoned, and experimented on one of our people for 14 years. "I know," Norrin whispered. "It is unforgivable. Yes, it is. But here's the thing about humans that your Council needs to learn." Reed's voice softened slightly. "We believe in second chances. We believe that people can change, can learn from mistakes. We've made plenty of our own. So here's what's going to happen. We're taking Dr. Foster home. We're taking all the data from the Harmony about their research, and then we're going to have a very serious conversation with the Council about the future. Because the quarantine ends today, we're not asking permission anymore. Humanity is returning to the galaxy, and the Council needs to decide if they want that to happen peacefully or not." Lieutenant Stone added, "The Admiral is already on her way. She'll be arriving within the day aboard the Horizon with a full diplomatic delegation. I suggest you contact your Council leadership and prepare them. This conversation has been 300 years overdue." As Reed and Stone left with Foster on a stretcher between them, Norrin stood alone in the empty cell and wondered what he had set in motion by reporting that distress signal. The galaxy was about to change, and he had no idea if it would survive the transformation. 3 days of tense negotiations aboard the Defiant had shown Ambassador Talara exactly how wrong she had been about humans. They were not the savage beasts she had imagined. They were worse in a way that she was only beginning to understand. They were organized, intelligent, and terrifyingly competent. They had turned their entire species into something unprecedented, while the Council had assumed they were trapped in primitive isolation. The human flagship Horizon arrived as promised, larger than any Council vessel, and bristling with weapons that were somehow beautiful in their deadliness. Admiral Grace Park came aboard with a delegation that included scientists, diplomats, military advisors, and historians. They were prepared for every possible conversation, which made sense for a species that had spent 3 centuries planning for this exact moment. The meeting took place in what the humans called a neutral space, a section of the Defiant that had been cleared and fitted with accommodations for multiple species needs. Temperature controls, atmosphere adjustments, seating appropriate to various body types. The humans had done their homework, learning about Council species from whatever fragmentary data had leaked through the quarantine over the centuries. Talara sat across from Admiral Park and felt small despite her species' natural height advantage. The human woman was older. Her hair shot through with gray, her face lined with years of experience. She looked like someone who had seen too much and survived it all anyway. "Let me be direct," Park began, her voice carrying authority without needing to be loud. The Council imprisoned humanity for defending itself during a first contact situation that nobody handled well. We understand fear. We understand caution. What we don't understand is how that fear led to the abduction and imprisonment of Dr. Lena Foster. So before we discuss anything else, I need you to explain that. Captain Darez, who had been silent for most of the negotiations, finally spoke. His crystalline structure seemed dimmer than usual, a sign of shame among his people. The Harmony was conducting unauthorized research. The project was hidden from Council oversight. Only a handful of high-ranking officials knew about Dr. Foster's presence. It was, as you say, illegal and immoral. And yet it continued for 14 years, Dr. Yuki Tanaka pointed out. She had joined the delegation specifically to discuss scientific ethics. During that time, hundreds of research reports were filed. Someone approved budgets, reviewed results, authorized continued detention. This wasn't a rogue operation. This was systematic. Talara felt her feathers flatten in distress. She had reviewed the files after learning about Foster. The reports were cold, clinical, treating a sentient being like any other test subject. They had measured her physical strength, tested her resistance to disease, studied her psychological responses to isolation. Everything the Council feared about humans, they had confirmed through torture disguised as research. There is no excuse, Talara said quietly. We were afraid. That does not justify what was done. I personally advocated for the quarantine. I spoke at Council sessions about the danger humanity represented. I never imagined my words would lead to such violations. Park's expression softened slightly. Fear makes people do terrible things. We know that better than most. Our own history is full of examples. But we learned something important from those mistakes. Fear of the other only leads to more fear and more harm. At some point, you have to choose trust. You speak of trust after we imprisoned your people? Dares asked. You speak of imprisonment after we vaporized your first contact team? Park countered. Both sides made catastrophic mistakes 300 years ago. We can spend the next 300 arguing about who was more wrong, or we can acknowledge that neither of us is the same species we were back then. Humanity has changed. Has the Council? Norin, who had been given a seat at the negotiations despite his low rank, spoke up nervously. We celebrated 300 years of peace before the Harmony was attacked. 300 years without major conflict, but perhaps we achieved that peace by avoiding anything difficult or challenging. We sealed away anything we feared instead of learning to live with it. The humans evolved by adapting to a world that tested them constantly. We evolved by removing tests from our environment. It was the most insightful thing anyone from the Council delegation had said. Park nodded in approval. That's a fair assessment. You built a peaceful society by excluding anything that might threaten that peace. It works until something forces you to confront what you've been avoiding. The Ravagers forced that confrontation. Over the following hours, both sides shared information that had been hidden for centuries. The humans showed the Council their technological developments. though Park made it clear they were holding back the most sensitive military capabilities. Faster-than-light drives that didn't rely on Council standard jump points. Energy weapons that operated on principles the Council's scientists didn't fully understand. Medical technology that could heal injuries thought to be permanent. In return, the Council shared the truth about the quarantine decision. It hadn't been unanimous. Several species had argued for continued contact, for slower and more careful integration. But fear had won. The same fear that led to Foster's imprisonment had led to humanity's isolation. Dr. Foster herself attended part of the meeting, still recovering but insisting on being present. Her testimony was difficult to hear. She spoke about the loneliness of captivity, the frustration of being studied rather than spoken to, the gradual realization that she might never be rescued. But she also spoke about the individual researchers who had treated her kindly within the constraints of their mission, the ones who had eventually begun asking her questions as a person rather than simply observing her as a specimen. "I'm angry," Foster admitted. "I lost 14 years. But I also learned something about the galaxy. You're not evil. You're just scared. And I understand that because humans spent most of our history being scared too. Scared of predators, scared of disease, scared of each other. We learned to manage that fear by facing it. You learn to manage it by avoiding it. Neither approach is wrong, but they're not compatible unless we figure out how to bridge the gap." Ambassador Talara found herself speaking before she fully thought through the words. "How do we bridge it? Your species is so far advanced beyond what we believed possible. You have weapons that could destroy our worlds. You have an entire hidden fleet we knew nothing about. How can we not fear you?" Park leaned forward. "The same way we're choosing not to fear you despite what you did to Dr. Foster. The same way we're choosing to answer distress calls instead of ignoring them. The same way we're sitting here talking instead of doing what Commander Ortega wanted to do, which was refuse all contact and let the Council handle their own problems. We bridge the gap by choosing to bridge it over and over until it becomes natural instead of difficult." "You make it sound simple," Darius said. "It's not simple," Park replied. "It's the hardest thing either of us will ever do. But the alternative is another 300 years of isolation and fear, and I don't think anyone in this room wants that. So here's our proposal. Humanity returns to the galaxy. We petition for Council membership under the same terms as any other species. We share some of our technology, specifically defensive and medical systems, in exchange for access to Council space and diplomatic recognition. We help you deal with threats like the Ravagers, who clearly operate with impunity because your fleets aren't equipped for real combat. And in return, you treat us like equals instead of threats." "And if the Council refuses?" Talara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Then we return anyway, but on our own terms without Council oversight. We establish our own diplomatic relationships with individual species. We patrol our own borders and enforce our own security. We become exactly what you feared, an independent power that answers to no one. But we'd rather do this together. We'd rather be part of the galaxy than apart from it." The negotiation continued for 3 more days. Difficult conversations about reparations for Foster, about the return of any other humans who might have been taken over the centuries, about the specifics of technology sharing and military cooperation. Slowly, carefully, a framework emerged. It wasn't perfect and both sides had concerns, but it was better than the alternatives. On the final day, as the delegations prepared to travel to the Council's primary station for the formal presentation, Norrin found himself speaking with Dr. Foster privately. She was examining the stars through a viewport, her expression distant. "Do you forgive us?" he asked quietly. "For what was done to you?" Foster considered the question for a long moment. "I'm not sure forgiveness is the right word. I'm angry, and I'll probably be angry for a long time. But I also understand that individuals aren't the same as institutions. The people who took me aren't in this room. The people in this room are trying to fix what was broken. That's enough for now." She turned to look at him directly. "Here's what you need to understand about humans, Norrin. We hold grudges, yes. We remember injuries, but we also believe in redemption. We believe people and civilizations can change. We have to believe that because our own history is full of terrible things we had to overcome. If we can't forgive others, we can't forgive ourselves. So yes, humanity will work with the Council, despite everything. Not because we've forgotten, but because we choose to believe in better futures." As the fleet prepared to depart for the Council station, Norin realized that the galaxy was about to change in ways nobody could fully predict. Humanity was returning, bringing with them all their strength and all their contradictions. They were warriors who chose peace, survivors who offered help, people shaped by a harsh world who somehow learned compassion anyway. The Council would have to adapt or be left behind, and for the first time in 300 years that felt like an opportunity rather than a threat. The Council chambers had never been designed for this kind of moment. Built centuries ago during an era of expansion and optimism, the circular hall was meant to showcase unity and cooperation among species. Today it felt like a courthouse, and humanity stood as both defendant and prosecutor. Admiral Grace Park stood at the center of the chamber floor, surrounded by representatives from 83 different species. The gallery above held observers from hundreds more worlds, all watching to see how this unprecedented situation would be resolved. Beside Park stood Captain David Reed, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, and 3 other humans carefully selected to represent different aspects of humanity. A scientist, a philosopher, and a former soldier who now taught conflict resolution. Across from them, arranged in their traditional semicircle of seats, the Council leadership watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Ambassador Talara had joined Park's delegation, a choice that had caused significant controversy but which Park had insisted upon. The feathered ambassador had become something unexpected over the past weeks, an advocate for humanity, despite her previous fears. The session began with formal accusations read by the Council Arbiter, a role held by a species that communicated through color changes in their translucent bodies. The charges against humanity included violations of quarantine, unauthorized military action in Council space, and possession of weapons technology beyond acceptable limits. The charges against the Council, brought by humanity's legal delegation, included unlawful imprisonment of sentient beings, unethical experimentation, and violation of sapient rights. Both sides were guilty. Everyone in the chamber knew it. The question was what came next. Park's opening statement was brief and direct, exactly as humans preferred. 300 years ago, 2 civilizations met badly. Both sides acted from fear and misunderstanding. Both sides have paid the price of that fear. Today we have a choice. We can continue to let that fear define us, or we can choose something different. Humanity chooses dialogue. Humanity chooses cooperation, but humanity also chooses dignity. We will not return to isolation. We will not accept being treated as criminals for defending ourselves. The question before this council is simple. Can you accept us as equals? The debate that followed lasted for hours. Species that had never experienced real conflict argued that humanity's military capabilities made them too dangerous for integration. Others pointed out that the Ravagers had operated with impunity for decades, precisely because the Council had no effective defense. The humans had eliminated a major pirate threat in 12 minutes. Didn't that capability have value? A representative from the Pond Collective, Norin's people, spoke about the rescue itself. The humans answered our distress call knowing we had imprisoned them. They saved us despite having every reason to refuse. They showed mercy to an enemy. Is that the action of savages? A member of the Silicon Syndicate countered with concerns about technological imbalance. They have faster-than-light systems we don't understand. Weapons we cannot counter. Medical advances that seem impossible. If we grant them membership, are we not inviting our own obsolescence? Dr. Tanaka responded to that directly. Humanity offers to share defensive technology and medical systems. Not weapons, not military advantages, but tools that protect and heal. We're not asking to dominate the Council. We're asking to participate in it. Yes, we advanced significantly during our isolation, but we did so knowing we might never have the chance to share those advances. Now we have that chance. Would you rather we remain separate, developing in unknown directions, or would you rather we work together? The philosopher in the human delegation, an elderly woman named Rachel Price, addressed the deeper concerns. Every species in this chamber evolved in specific conditions. You adapted to your worlds and your challenges, so did we. Earth taught us to be resilient, to fight when necessary, to protect each other. But it also taught us the value of cooperation. Humans survived not because we were the strongest or the fastest. We survived because we learned to work together despite our differences. That's what we offer the Council, the experience of unity forged in adversity. Ambassador Talara spoke next, and her words carried weight precisely because everyone knew her history of opposing humanity. I advocated for the quarantine. I spoke about the danger humans represented. I was wrong. Not wrong about their capability for violence, that is real and documented, but wrong about what that capability meant. The humans destroyed the Ravagers because they threatened innocent lives. They answered our distress call because it was right, not because it was easy or profitable. They negotiate now in good faith despite what we did to one of their own. I have seen humans up close, worked with them, argued with them, learned from them. They are not monsters. They are survivors who refuse to let survival make them cruel. If we reject them, we reject everything the Council claims to stand for. The vote was called as the station's star began to set behind the chamber's massive viewports, casting long shadows across the assembly. Each species had one vote. The tally would need a 2/3 majority for admission to the Council under standard terms. The results came in slowly, species by species announcing their positions. The tension in the chamber was suffocating. Park stood perfectly still, her face revealing nothing, but Reed noticed her hands clasped tightly behind her back. When the final count appeared, the chamber fell silent. 61 votes for admission. 22 against humanity had been accepted, but barely. The conditions of membership were read aloud by the arbiter. Humanity would share defensive shield technology and specified medical advances. They would agree to limits on fleet expansion for the first decade of membership. They would participate in joint military operations against threats like the Ravagers, and they would open Earth to carefully controlled diplomatic and scientific exchange. In return, the Council formally apologized for the imprisonment of Dr. Lena Foster and agreed to pay reparations to her and any other humans who might be found in similar situations. They acknowledged the legitimacy of humanity's defensive actions during First Contact, and they agreed to revise the quarantine protocols for other Deathworlds, with humanity's input on establishing safer contact procedures. It wasn't perfect. Both sides had to compromise. But it was a beginning. The formal ceremonies took another 3 days. Treaties were signed, embassies were established, cultural exchanges were planned. Through it all, Park maintained her professional composure. Only when she returned to the horizon, alone in her quarters, did she allow herself to feel the weight of what they had accomplished. Commander Luis Ortega joined her there, bringing 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey that had been saved for exactly this moment. "We did it, Admiral. Humanity is no longer alone." "We were never alone," Park replied, accepting the glass. "We had each other. But now we have more. Now we have potential." A month later, the first joint mission launched from Council space. 6 ships, 3 Council vessels and 3 human warships. Their destination was another Deathworld in the quarantine zone, home to a species that had been isolated for even longer than humanity. Captain Reed commanded the expedition, with Ambassador Tilara serving as the primary Council representative. Before the fleet departed, Norin received an unexpected assignment. He was being transferred to the new Human Galactic Relations Division, where his experience during the First Contact would be invaluable. He accepted with a mixture of terror and excitement, knowing his life would never be the same. Dr. Lena Foster watched the expedition launch from Earth, where she had returned to resume her research and her life. She had been offered a position on the mission but declined, not ready to leave home again so soon. Instead, she worked with Dr. Tanaka on developing better protocols for interspecies communication, hoping to prevent future misunderstandings. The mission to the next Deathworld would be different from humanity's own First Contact. This time, both sides approached with humility and preparation. This time, they had learned from past mistakes. Admiral Park watched the fleet disappear into faster-than-light travel from Haven 1, the station that had been humanity's watchful guardian for so long. Commander Ortega stood beside her, and she could feel his lingering doubts. "Do you trust them?" he asked, the same question he had posed at the beginning of this entire situation. Park considered her answer carefully. "I trust that both sides will make mistakes. I trust that some species will never fully accept us, and some humans will never fully trust the Council. I trust that this will be difficult and complicated and frustrating. But I also trust that we're better off trying than staying isolated in fear. The galaxy is large enough for all of us if we're willing to share it." "That's not really an answer," Ortega pointed out. "No," Park agreed. "It's not. But it's the best I can offer. trust isn't something you have or don't have. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice. The Council chose to vote for our membership. We chose to answer their distress call. Those are the foundations. Now we see what we can build on them. Far across the galaxy in the Council chambers, the Arbiter was already preparing for the next session. The admission of humanity had opened questions that had been sealed for centuries. If humans could be integrated despite their Deathworld origins, what about the other quarantined species? What about the dozens of worlds that had been isolated out of fear? The galaxy was changing, and nobody knew exactly where it would lead. But for the first time in 300 years, humanity was part of that change rather than excluded from it. They brought their strength, their technology, their complicated history, and their stubborn refusal to give up on peace even when it seemed impossible. The Defiant and its crew reached the new Deathworld and began preliminary scans. The planet below was harsh, covered in storms and extreme temperatures. The dominant species had achieved early spaceflight, but nothing beyond their solar system. They had no idea they were being watched, evaluated, approached. Captain Reed opened a communication channel to all ships in the fleet. "This is Defiant to all vessels. Remember, we're here to make contact, not to conquer. We're here to offer partnership, not pity. These people, whoever they are, survived their world just like we survived ours. They deserve respect, not fear. Let's show them what the galaxy can be when it's at its best." The fleet descended toward the storm-racked world together. Human and alien, former prisoners and former jailers, united by the understanding that survival meant more than just living. It meant finding others who survived and helping them thrive. This was the promise humanity made to the galaxy: strength in service of others, survival in service of growth, and power tempered by the memory of what it meant to be alone and afraid. The Council had triggered an SOS that unleashed the Deathworlder fleet. But what they truly unleashed was the possibility of a galaxy where strength and compassion could exist together, where fear could become understanding, where isolation could become unity, where survivors could become protectors. That was the future Admiral Park had fought for. That was the future Captain Reed now flew toward. And that was the future the galaxy would build together, one difficult choice at a time.